Okay, we're back. Today we're going to talk about Blood Hunt Book 3, which is Howler Dilemma. Now, there are two parts at the very beginning. One part is set in the late year 2105, and then it starts up again for the regular part of the book in the next year. And I'm doing it this way because it explains why Kai is not with her former partner, excuse me, even though a lot of people disagree with the decision. Now, the prologue is an excerpt from Kai's journal, and it's dated September 1st, 2105, Tuesday, 3 months after the Mothman mission, at 1500 hours in Chicago, Illinois, FAC headquarters east. The journal reads, "Today will quite probably be one that will go down as legend here at FAC headquarters. Captain Yamato and I have spent the last 3 months at his townhouse here in Chicago so I could be closer to the medical facilities and physical rehabilitation. This darned leg of mine took a beating during the Mothman mission. Despite doing what I could with rudimentary field first aid and using Osage knowledge, there were some problems. Fortunately, no infections due to the quick application of wet red clay and mud, then tying it up. But old scars being torn open and even having some muscle being cut up, then running with that injury, as if I had a choice, required emergency stitching when I fell into the motel room at the end of it all. Then 2 surgeries, and finally physical therapy. Frankly, I felt I had made a lot of progress and could hold my own back at the Eagle Rock facility, light duty mind you, with my second in command taking the heavier load. But Captain Yamato stubbornly insisted we clear that idea with Dr. Tama, in due time, as he put it. This morning, we got a phone call from Commander Tillman ordering us to report to headquarters for a meeting with some important people, and for me, a medical evaluation. Of course, this thoroughly annoyed Captain Yamato beyond measure, as he felt I was nowhere near ready for any high-level meetings or a full medical evaluation. I was still using a cane that the elders had fancied up for me, so I could have some assistance in getting around because my leg would suddenly yell, "Nope, going down." The nanos in me have been challenged quite a bit trying to repair the damage, and I'm pretty sure they are annoyed with the 2 surgeries rearranging things on them. Do nanos feel emotion? I have been trying to tell Michael if I could get back to the Zishu reservation, I would heal faster and better amongst nature. But of course, he was not convinced of that. Needless to say, neither of us dared disobey an order to report in, so we both dressed in our finest, complete with commendation medals, etc. And even Thunder looked magnificent with his new collar and rank emblem hanging from it. Commander Tillman had been so impressed with how Thunder had remained calm and collected during the Mothman mission that he gave my lupine companion the honorary rank of Private First Class. I must admit, the emblem does look very smart hanging from his specially made collar. I must digress, dear journal, and note here that CTI, Chicago Thematic Institute, Lisa, and Dr. Tama pulled a couple of fast ones on me. I had wondered how this new collar of Thunder's was able to change with each of his shiftings in size and breed. It turns out, according to Lisa, that they used nanos in the collar to work in conjunction with the nanos they had injected into Thunder. At first, I was furious that they would do something like this without my permission. This is my fur kid we're talking about, my lifelong companion, and they injected. Lisa claims they could hear my yelling clear down in research and development. However, Dr. Tama finally got me to listen and reminded me of the fact that since Thunder now had an FAC rank, they needed to keep him as healthy as possible. Plus, the ornery wolf indicated he rather enjoyed having them on board. He was teaching them many things about wolves, and he learned from them. I never thought I would see the day when there is a symbiotic relationship between a mutant wolf and nanos. And apparently, while I was unconscious for that week after I got back to the motel room with the Mothman Queen egg, CTI and Dr. Tama decided I needed to have some nanos as well. Mostly because they needed help in fixing my leg. And if I ever got in trouble again, the little pipsqueaks now floating around in my system can signal this, keep track of my CDAT output, and keep me alive while waiting for help. Upon learning of this, I demanded they get the nanos out of me. I rather resented them doing something like that, even if it was or is in the best interest of my health and whereabouts. But by the time I learned of this fact, Dr. Tama claimed it would cause me great harm to remove them. Well, as long as the tiny intruders, yes, I still resent them, don't try telling me what to do, I guess I can live with it. I am assured they cannot control a person's mind, merely learn about the person's health and assist when things go wrong. We'll see about that. Turns out even Kumda Kwei approves of the nanos being in me. She indicated them being in there helps and enhances my ability. Damn it, I have been outvoted. Now, why we got called back into headquarters? Actually, there were two reasons. And the second part is partially my own doing, and I am immensely pleased with how well it turned out. First of all, Commander Tillman decided after almost 3 years as a team that he had to split our working partnership up. Tillman felt it was best to break the team up since Michael was becoming more and more active with extrications while I was busy with the training center and monster hunts. Hey, I do extrications too. He believed it was best to do so before either of us got distracted worrying about one another, since in his estimation we would be putting each other in danger. I felt that was a preposterous notion, since we had been on intense hunts and extrications together and solo in those 3 years, and not once did we think about one another while doing so other than as a team. However, from a command point of view, it did make some sense. And after a brief discussion, we both agreed to the termination of the partnership. Michael openly expressed pride in all I had accomplished, even though he still had no idea how I managed to do all the things I could, or how on earth I got away with it. And I openly expressed it was because of his love, trust, understanding, and patient teaching that brought about the realizing of my full-blood potential. So, in my humble opinion, it had been a successful partnership, and because of it, we are both going far. With the team being split up, we both felt it was best to no longer be lovers, but instead be good friends. It felt like the most practical course of action. After all, there was no chance we would be anything but what we were. He's a good man and will always be a dear, dear friend. Even if Thunder is disgusted over that decision, my faithful lupine companion will always adore our man, and I think highly of him, as does Thunder. For that, I am pleased. Although Michael and I both swore we heard two women's voices very faintly protesting the decision with great vigor, I think perhaps we might have angered our great-great-grandmothers. I told Commander Tillman in front of Michael if ever my former partner needed anything, and I meant anything, I would be there for him in a heartbeat. It seemed to relieve our commander, but it did cause a momentary look of surprise on Michael's face. What? I am not some weepy female prone to hysterics. Besides, I command a platoon of hunters, soldiers. I know something about dealing with emotions. There have been plenty of moments where someone in my command or a trainee in the survival school has just totally lost it. Point in fact, the one who killed himself a few years ago with mushrooms. That just upset me. But I didn't show it. I kept my cool. I still blame myself. But anyway, So naturally, I feel that the information our partnership relationship was being split up for the needs of the many was just not an acceptable reason to become emotional. We were good for one another, and because of the relationship, we both grew. Where's the harm in that? I did have a woman-to-woman talk with Lisa after everything had settled down, because this was the first relationship I had ever been in, and I wanted to make sure if my non-reaction, as Tillman coined it, to the disbanding of such was reasonable. Well, apparently, according to Lisa, most women tend to be irrational and prone to dramatics when something like that happens. But my view over the ending of the dual partnership was quite logical and down to earth and healthy. Good to know. I think my parents would have approved of the way I see it. Now, if I can just find a way to convince our great-great-grandmothers it was best for the all. I keep hearing their mutterings, and oh boy, they are not pleased. Now, coming to the second reason we were called to headquarters. I am admittedly quite proud of it. See, here's the thing. As has been previously noted in many of my journals, I can talk with the planet, or come to Quay, Great Mother, and almost all life forms on her and in her. Now, granted, sometimes it's not beneficial to be able to speak with the life forms, especially when said life form does not wish to establish dialogue, but instead would rather try and eat you, pointing at my battered leg. That gator was just not cooperative, but Commander Tillman did get a nice briefcase and some other accoutrement out of that encounter. Anyways, it occurred to me about 6 months before the Mothman mission that I could use that ability, along with my father's old bounty hunting contacts, plus the contacts I'd built up over the years, to a good cause. I'd gotten Michael to open up about his childhood and his now deceased wife, plus his missing child and father. It was only a fair, equitable change of information since I had opened up to him about my life before he came along. On a side note, to whomever reads this at some point down the road, a piece of advice. Sound advice. Know your partner inside and out. It will quite literally save your lives at some point. Now, back to what I was talking about. After hearing about his missing father and his only child, well, I wanted to find them. If they were dead, I could at least bring the remains home for burial and a bit of closure for him. But, I had a very strong feeling they were still alive and healthy. Lisa figured out what I was doing because she caught me farseeing one day in the research room at CTI. Darn that aerial map of Switzerland. What alerted her into watching me as I might be up to something was because of how distracted and distant I seemed to be. So she consulted with the CTI tech team and secretly slipped their newest device onto the back of my neck. I never have been able to figure out how it managed to implant itself without me feeling it do so. Oh, that girl. But that's what friends are for, or so I'm told. Apparently, the device was reading my CDAT outputs and they were spiking all over the place. So I had to let Dr. Tama and Lisa in on what I was attempting to do. Call it self-defense if you will, because it was either tell them what, or rather who I was tracking down, or be hauled in for an evaluation, and I hate those things. Besides, if my leads were correct, the STI, Swiss Thematic Institute, was going to be needing a DNA sample from Michael to do a comparison and match. And what better person to get that sample, oh so sneakily, than good old Dr. Tama herself. Somehow, we managed to hide my personal mission from Michael, while at the same time launch quite the rescue mission when I finally pinpointed, with a lot of help, the location of his missing family members. According to Commander Tillman, as if we could have kept this secret from him for very long, the rescue team had gotten them both into STI while I was on the Mothman mission. It took until just last night to get them out of Switzerland and into Chicago headquarters. After our first meeting with Commander Tillman earlier today, He sent us off to the meeting with some very important people, with me leading the way. I could tell Michael was equally parts annoyed that I knew what was going on, and he had not been apprised, and equal parts wondering why personnel was smiling so as we walked past them. Even Thunder was prancing rather proudly. Big show-off. When I opened the conference room door, then stepped back for Michael to go ahead of me, I wasn't sure how the reunion would go. He seemed a bit confused at first, but when his elderly father stood and addressed him in Japanese, I felt the unusual prickle of tears in response to the incredulous expression that came over Michael's face. When his father indicated the young man standing next to him was Michael's son, well, I stepped out and closed the door. It seemed to be the most tactful and respectful action I could do considering the circumstances. Besides, I had a little lizard friend hiding up in the ductwork watching the reunion. What he relayed to me was an emotional scene, and I knew then that Michael would have been very embarrassed if I had witnessed that firsthand. He will never know that I knew what happened in that room. It is rather convenient having a reptile friend keeping watch on things. Dr. Tama waylaid me in the hall when I stepped away from the conference room door. My word, that woman sure can shield. She never even gave me a chance to notify her that I was ready for the medical evaluation. Nope, not Dr. Tama. She waits for no one. So I got my sorry ass hauled into the medical department in a private exam room and my uniform off for a complete physical. I hate those things. I am glad at least I had a hospital gown on because we both got a surprise while she had my leg exposed. The door had opened up and in walked the elderly Yamato telling his grown son, who was right behind him, to stop fussing. He'd seen torn up bodies before. Besides, he wanted to meet the young lady who had pulled off their rescue. Somehow Mr. Yamato had heard about my leg and wanted to offer the services of Japanese healing techniques. I wasn't embarrassed in the least, but Michael sure looked incredibly uncomfortable. Dr. Katama kept trying to tell the elderly Yamato that I had an extreme needle phobia. But really, after having an emergency field stitching done on my leg, then waking up from that week-long coma and finding myself hooked up to machines, several IV lines and such, and Michael right next to me preparing to use command voice on me if I freaked. You know what? Needles don't bother me so much now. Oh, granted, I can guarantee me screaming at banshee levels if a hostile came towards me with a needle. But regular medical procedures? Nah. I found myself fascinated by the idea of acupuncture, especially when Mr. Yamato claimed it would stop the muscle spasms, ease the constant ache, and help the nanos complete their repairs. To what extent they could do. However, he was most kind when he patted the leg, gave me a sorrowful look, and told me, "First Lieutenant will always have a slight limp, though. Much damage to the configuration of muscles and surrounding tissues. You should not have been able to run after being sliced open like that." Michael, bless his heart, seemed to swell with pride when he spoke. "Father, from my own experience working with her, Kai does not comprehend the word no, or fear for that matter." I had to refrain from laughing when his father solemnly told me I should learn to cultivate those two concepts. It's a little late now. Before I could answer him, Mr. Yamato proceeded to produce some incredibly long, very thin needles and began inserting them all along my leg, my arms, and back. He fussed over those old scars until I finally told him they didn't physically bother me and the person responsible for them was long dead. And there were even some needles on my forehead. Dr. Thomas surprised us all by pulling out an acupuncture chart to show me that he was placing them along what she called meridian lines. "But how did you know about her occasional migraines?" All he did was point at my eyes and remark, "Those nanos are still deciding what takes precedence." After he was finished, I was amazed over how much better the leg felt, and oh, I am so full of energy. Dr. Tama has released me back to normal duties, but I am to delegate heavier work for a while yet. Oh, most excellent. The fall schedule at the Survival School is about to start, and there is a certain newly busted down to private I want to put through the paces. And now Michael has his family again. Everything is how it should be. End journal. And this is the end of part 1.